guy that some of you might recognize is Frederick Winslow Taylor. So Frederick Winslow Taylor, he wrote Principles of Scientific Management, which is sort of the basis for how you organize, how you think about organizations. So this guy, he was a shop manager in a steelworks, a steel mill. So that was his background. And he found out that, there are ways to improve the steel mill and to improve operations. So he started what he called scientific studies of how to improve things. So he was the first guy who actually put this into a system, how to improve, business operations in a systematic way. And he made fantastic improvements. He was a kind of genius. Okay. So that was what is the thing he's sort of writing about in Principles of Scientific Management, which was published around, I think, 1915, 1910, something like that. But there was another thing with this guy, and it's that he had a kind of a rotten way to view people. So the expression "dumb as an ox" was from his book. Okay, so the way he wrote about the people, the factory workers, was that they are really stupid. They don't know shit. And they need managers. They need to be controlled, scientifically controlled and managed. So he introduced the idea of having micromanagement, having managers exactly telling people how to do it, by the book. So his idea on management was, you write a book with a method. This is the way you should work. And then you tell people how to do it, and managers are the ones that should tell people how to do it. So before Taylor, people were sort of, working the way they had been taught by their own experience. It was more experience-based. You didn't have micromanagement in the same way. You more had, people, they did how they did. But he introduced the concept that, managers' method, okay? And his idea of an organization and leadership is very sticky. Because even though we don't say anymore that people are stupid as oxes, it's still the concept that we have around organizations, that you must control and you must tell people how to do it. Because his system worked. I mean, they made major productivity improvements in his day. But it had some side effects. That's why I want to introduce this concept of the fossil organizations, the sort of dinosaur organization, because the sort of bad side effect of his way of thinking was that we developed, the manager, the leader, into this guy who's sort of the person at the top who's really mean, real nasty, okay? The dinosaur, the Tyrannosaurus. So the way we have been thinking for a long time about management is micromanagement, do it by the book, and also have some really mean, badass people at the top, that drive people with a whip and really, get them to do the things they should do, okay? So that's a mental image, image that's sort of hard to get rid of. So I want to introduce to you another person who's not as famous as Taylor, but who's actually one of the pioneers in leadership and management. Her name is Mary Parker Follett. And she is now being recognized as the one who, in a way, introduced modern management and modern leadership, and in a way, lay the groundworks, the foundation for what is agile development and all this thinking. So Follett lived just like 10, 15 years after Taylor. So she made her basic work like in the 1920s. And she came from a different background than Frederick Taylor, because she was working with social centers, community centers, which is like in the US, kind of social service, but it's more private. And she came from a privileged background, so she could, do volunteer work, and that was what she was doing. So she worked with people organizations. That was what she created. And so she didn't work in industry. So she realized that, when you work with people, you must build up a kind of common understanding about the situation. She called this the law of the situation. We must understand the situation, the context, and together, managers and everyone else, employees, understand together how to go about working in this situation and evolving the corporation and so on. She was very influential actually in her time, even though she's largely forgotten today. And she talked about living organizations. That was her concept. And she also said, even though she actually said that she was working with scientific management, because scientific management was in its day like agile is now. Everyone was saying, we work with scientific management. That's really cool. Okay, that was the hot stuff. But even though she said she was working with scientific management, she had an entirely different concept about what it was. So she had this difference she was talking about between power over, which is when you work in this Tayloristic way of giving orders to someone, and what she called power with, to have you work with someone and we together develop things and we sort of create things together. It's not like I give you orders. We together will reach a conclusion. So she was extremely modern in the way still when you read her, it's like, she's still kind of cutting edge, even though it's kind of hard to read some of her works, but I can really recommend it. So we have had, since the day of Taylor's, there's been a different story, another way of thinking about management. But it's just now that we are becoming to, really understand it and use it, this way of thinking, which we now call agile, for example.